The Comanche woman offered herself to save her starving child. The rancher chose mercy. The winter had come early that year, and it was unlike any Ahioka had seen before. The snow fell thick and heavy across the plains, covering the earth in a white blanket that made every step a struggle. Trees bowed under the weight of ice, and the wind whipped mercilessly across the open land, carrying with it a biting chill that cut through even the warmest furs. Ahioka clutched her child, Little Hawk, to her chest, trying to shield him from the cold. His small body shivered, and tears ran down his cheeks, leaving tiny trails in the frost that clung to her clothing. Her heart ached as she felt the weakness in his arms, the frailty that had been growing over the past few weeks as their food supplies dwindled. Their home was little more than a makeshift shelter, built from branches and animal hides, far from the safety of any village. Ahioka had chosen this place because it offered some seclusion, a chance to avoid the conflicts that had driven her tribe farther west. But the isolation came with its own dangers. Hunting was difficult in the deep snow, and the streams she relied on for water were frozen over. She had tried to track deer and rabbits, following faint signs in the snow, but the animals were scarce, hidden or dead from the relentless cold. Each day the hunger gnawed at her stomach, and she felt the pain of watching her child suffer, unable to provide him with the nourishment he desperately needed. Ahioka remembered the lessons of her mother, who had taught her the ways of survival, how to read the land, and how to respect its gifts. She thought of the small victories she had had in the past, finding a rabbit snare, gathering edible roots, making fire from damp wood. But now the winter seemed determined to challenge her skills and her spirit. She dug through the snow, searching for anything that might be left in the frozen earth, roots, berries, or even the occasional stubborn mushroom. Each discovery was a small triumph, but never enough to fill Little Hawk's belly. The nights were the hardest. Darkness came early, and the cold seeped into every corner of their tiny shelter. Ahioka wrapped Little Hawk tightly in layers of cloth and animal hides, murmuring songs from her childhood to calm him. She whispered stories of their ancestors, of the brave warriors and wise women who had survived far worse. Her voice was a fragile shield against the biting wind that seemed to howl louder when the fire died down. She feared that if she could not keep the fire alive, the cold would take them both before morning came. Each morning she ventured outside, stepping carefully through the deep snow, scanning the horizon for any sign of life or hope. She thought of the distant ranches she had glimpsed in her travels, the smoke rising from chimneys in the early morning light. They seemed like islands of warmth in the endless white, places where food and safety might be found. But approaching them was dangerous. Settlers were often suspicious of travelers, especially those who were alone and from her tribe. She had heard stories of harsh men who would drive her away, or worse if they saw her. And yet, the sight of her child's fragile form, the pale cheeks and hollow eyes, made her consider every risk. Hunger made her feel weak, but the thought of Little Hawk gave her strength. She remembered the way he had smiled at the first snowfall, how he had laughed when he made little footprints in the fresh snow. She longed to see that spark of joy again, to hear his laughter echoing through their small shelter. The idea of losing him to starvation filled her with fear she had never known, a fear that pushed her forward despite the harsh conditions. Every step she took in the snow was a step fueled by love and desperation. On one particularly bitter morning, Ahioka woke to find the snow had drifted high around their shelter, nearly burying it. Little Hawk was crying, his small fist banging weakly against the frozen ground. She tried to comfort him, but her own body ached from exhaustion and hunger. She realized that time was slipping away, that the longer they stayed isolated, the greater the danger. She made a difficult decision. They could not survive here much longer. She would have to seek help, even if it meant facing fear and uncertainty. Bundling Little Hawk close, she began the slow journey across the snow-covered plains. Her eyes scanned for any signs of life, the faint tracks of animals, the smoke of distant fires, the outline of a fence or a roof in the far distance. Every step was heavy, her legs burning from the effort, her breath forming clouds in the icy air. She kept her child wrapped tightly, whispering encouragement, promising him food and warmth, even though she could not be certain of finding either. Along the way, she remembered the stories her elders had told her of the land, of the generosity and the danger that existed side by side. The plains were beautiful, even in winter, with the sun sparkling on the snow and the distant mountains standing tall and silent. But beauty did not feed the hungry, and every mile she traveled was a reminder of the stakes. Her determination grew, fueled by love, fear, and hope. She thought that perhaps somewhere ahead they would find a kind soul willing to help. Hours passed, the snow crunching beneath her feet, the wind biting at her cheeks. Little Hawk's cries grew weaker, and she feared he would not survive the journey. But then, through the whiteness, she saw a column of smoke rising into the sky. It was faint, almost hidden by the blizzard. But it was enough to lift her spirits. A small ranch, perhaps, where she might find food, shelter, and warmth. Her heart leapt at the sight, but caution tempered her excitement. She knew approaching strangers could be dangerous. She needed to think carefully, to present herself in a way that would not alarm those inside. As they drew closer, Ahioka prepared herself. She smoothed her clothes, though they were worn and frostbitten, and tried to calm Little Hawk, who was trembling in her arms. She rehearsed the words she would say, how she would explain her situation, how she would plead for help without angering or frightening the rancher. She thought of every lesson her mother had taught her about diplomacy and courage, about showing respect even in the face of desperation. Finally, they reached the edge of the ranch. The building was simple but sturdy, smoke curling from the chimney in welcoming spirals. Ahioka's stomach twisted with fear and hope. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding Little Hawk tightly. Her eyes met those of the rancher, who had come to investigate the sound of footsteps in the snow. He was a tall man, rugged and wary, with lines on his face that spoke of hardship and experience. Ahioka's heart pounded as she spoke, her voice steady despite the cold and fear. She explained her situation, the famine that had brought them here, the desperation that drove her to seek help. The rancher listened carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. Ahioka offered what she could, even herself, if it would save her child. She promised service, labor, or anything asked of her in exchange for food and warmth for Little Hawk. Her voice was soft but firm, filled with a mother's determination and a plea for mercy. She felt exposed and vulnerable, that she had no choice. The child's life depended on it, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The rancher's expression softened slightly, though he remained cautious. He saw the truth in her eyes, the honesty in her words, the desperate love that drove her to take such a risk. He thought of his own family, of the nights he had worried about providing for them, and of the many stories he had heard of suffering on the plains. Something in him stirred, a sense of compassion that overcame fear. He nodded slowly and stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. Inside, the warmth of the fire enveloped them, and Little Hawk's small body relaxed for the first time in days. Ahioka felt tears prick her eyes as she watched her child begin to regain strength. She knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time in many days, hope returned to her heart. She whispered a quiet thanks to the spirits of the land and the kindness of the stranger, promising herself that she would repay this mercy in whatever way she could. Outside, the snow continued to fall thick and relentless, but inside the ranch a small miracle had taken place. A mother's love, tested by hunger and hardship, had met with mercy and compassion, proving that even in the harshest winter warmth could be found, not just in fire but in human hearts. The warmth inside the ranch felt almost like magic after the endless cold of the plains. Ahioka's fingers, stiff from frost, finally began to regain some feeling as the heat from the fire slowly seeped through her layers of clothing. Little Hawk lay on a blanket near the hearth, his small chest rising and falling as he drifted into a deep sleep for the first time in days. Ahioka watched him with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The worst of the journey might have passed, but she knew that the safety of this moment depended entirely on the stranger who had welcomed them in. The rancher, Mr. Thompson, was a man of quiet strength and careful observation. He had seen hardship in many forms: harsh winters, failed crops, and travelers who came seeking help under desperate circumstances. But there was something different about Ahioka. He saw in her eyes a fierce determination, a love so strong that it outweighed fear and hunger. And yet he also sensed vulnerability, a fragility born of exhaustion and worry. He could not deny the honesty in her voice, the truth in her story, and, most importantly, the desperation of a mother willing to sacrifice everything for her child. Ahioka's first moments in the warmth were quiet. She sat near the fire, rubbing her hands and watching Little Hawk sleep. She felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but it was mixed with anxiety. How would the rancher respond to her offer of service? Would he trust her, or would he see her as an outsider to be feared and turned away? She knew that her fate, and that of her child, rested entirely on his next words. "Mr. Body." Thompson moved slowly toward her, his heavy boots muffled by the thick rugs on the floor. He carried a small bowl filled with steaming broth, the scent rich and comforting. He knelt beside Ahioka and held it out. "This will help him," he said, his voice low but steady. "He needs strength, and so do you." Ahioka accepted the bowl with a slight bow, her gratitude unspoken but clear in her eyes. She knew that accepting his help did not yet guarantee safety. It was only the first step, but it was a step she could not afford to refuse. As Little Hawk began to stir, drawn by the smell of food, Ahioka carefully lifted him onto her lap. She fed him spoonful by spoonful, watching as color slowly returned to his cheeks. His small hands clutched at the bowl, eager but unsteady. Tears formed in Ahioka's eyes as she saw him eat, realizing that he might survive this brutal winter after all. She whispered words of encouragement, softly praising him for being strong, and he smiled faintly, the first sign of hope in days. Once Little Hawk was resting comfortably again, Ahioka turned to Mr. Thompson, her voice hesitant but firm. "I am willing to do anything to care for my child. I can work, help with chores, or anything you ask. I only need food and shelter for him." Her words were spoken with sincerity, carrying the weight of her desperation. She offered herself fully, not as a servant to be used, but as a mother seeking mercy for her child. Mr. Thompson paused, thinking carefully. He had faced many difficult decisions in his life, but this one was unlike any other. He had the power to refuse, to enforce the strict boundaries he usually maintained between his ranch and strangers. Yet looking at Ahioka, he felt a stirring of compassion that overrode caution. He knew what it meant to care for someone so completely, and he could not turn away a mother and child in need. But he also had to act wisely, balancing mercy with caution. He decided that the first act must be one of immediate aid, not service. He motioned toward the stove. "You will stay here tonight," he said. "Eat, rest, and warm yourself. Tomorrow we will talk about what help you need and what you can do in return. For now, you and the child must survive." Ahioka nodded, a mixture of relief and humility washing over her. She had expected rejection, perhaps even hostility, but instead she was met with careful kindness. That night, as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, she felt a cautious sense of security. She wrapped Little Hawk in blankets, sitting close to him as he slept. Her thoughts drifted to the journey ahead. She would have to work to repay this kindness, but she also knew that survival depended on building trust, on proving herself worthy of the mercy shown to her. The next morning, Ahioka awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the small windows. The wind outside still rattled the walls of the cabin, but inside there was warmth and the comforting smell of fresh bread and stew. Little Hawk was already awake, his eyes bright and curious despite the lingering weakness in his small body. Ahioka felt a smile tug at her lips as she fed him breakfast, savoring the simple pleasure of watching him regain his strength. After breakfast, Mr. Thompson invited Ahioka to help with small tasks around the ranch. He was careful not to overwhelm her, recognizing that she was still recovering from exhaustion and hunger. She helped mend fences, carry firewood, and prepare food. Each task was challenging, but her determination never wavered. She felt a quiet pride in her ability to contribute, even in a small way, and she sensed that the rancher respected her efforts. Over the following days, Ahioka learned more about the routines of the ranch. She observed the careful ways in which Mr. Thompson managed his animals, noting how he fed the horses, milked the cows, and maintained the fields. She asked questions, eager to learn, and he patiently explained each task. In return, she shared knowledge from her own life: how to track animals in snow, how to find edible roots and herbs, and ways to store food for the winter. The exchange of knowledge created a bond between them, one built on mutual respect rather than fear or suspicion. Little Hawk grew stronger each day. His cheeks filled out, and his laughter began to return, brightening the once lonely cabin. Ahioka watched him play near the fire, his small hands exploring, his eyes wide with wonder at the new world of warmth and safety she had found for him. The sound of his laughter was a balm to her weary spirit, a reminder that her journey had not been in vain. Even as she worked and cared for her child, Ahioka remained cautious. She knew that not all settlers were as kind as Mr. Thompson, and she had to be mindful of the delicate trust she was building. She approached each task with care, showing diligence and humility, and she made sure Little Hawk understood that they were guests in this home. She taught him respect for the rules of the ranch, and he learned quickly, his natural curiosity tempered by the guidance of his mother. As the days turned into weeks, a quiet routine developed. Ahioka and Little Hawk survived on the food and shelter provided by the ranch, while she contributed through her labor and knowledge. The harsh winter continued outside, but inside the cabin there was a growing sense of security and hope. Ahioka began to dream of a future beyond survival, of a life where she could care for her child without fear, and where kindness might flourish even in the harshest conditions. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Mr. Thompson sat with Ahioka by the fire. He spoke of the hardships he had seen in his life, of winters like this one, and of the importance of compassion. "It is not always easy to help," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "But sometimes it is the only thing that makes life worth living. You have reminded me of that." Ahioka felt a deep gratitude not just for the food and warmth but for the recognition of her courage and love. She understood that mercy could be given freely, and that it had the power to change lives. The bond between Ahioka and the rancher grew stronger with each passing day. She learned that survival was not just about finding food, but about finding allies, building trust, and showing respect. She realized that her initial offer of service, made out of desperation, had opened a door to understanding and cooperation. In the harsh frontier, such connections were rare, and she valued this one deeply. As the winter pressed on, Ahioka continued to care for Little Hawk, her heart lighter now that he was strong and healthy again. She also began to consider the future, thinking about how she could repay the kindness shown to her. She planned to use her skills to help around the ranch, to support Mr. Thompson and the other settlers, and to create a life where her child could grow safely. The experience had taught her that even in the most difficult times, courage, love, and mercy could create hope. And so, life at the ranch continued. Ahioka and Little Hawk survived the harsh winter, and in the process they formed bonds that transcended fear and distance. The rancher's choice to show mercy had saved a life, and the mother's love had guided her through despair to a place of safety. In the quiet moments by the fire, Ahioka reflected on the journey that had brought them here, understanding that hope, courage, and compassion were stronger than any winter storm. The story of those first days at the ranch became a quiet memory for Ahioka, a reminder of desperation, courage, and the power of mercy. She had come seeking help, offering everything she had, and she had been met with kindness and understanding. That lesson would stay with her forever, shaping the way she lived, loved, and guided her child in a world that could be harsh but also full of unexpected goodness. The days passed slowly yet steadily as Ahioka settled into the rhythm of life at the ranch. Every morning she woke before dawn to fetch water from the frozen well and start the fire, careful to protect Little Hawk from the bitter cold. The boy had grown stronger, his cheeks rosy, and his small hands now capable of helping in small ways around the cabin. Ahioka felt a mixture of pride and relief as she watched him explore, learning quickly the ways of the ranch. Each task she taught him, from gathering wood to carrying small tools, was a lesson in survival and responsibility, lessons she hoped would protect him in the uncertain world beyond the warmth of the cabin. Despite the growing bond between Ahioka and the rancher, there remained a quiet tension. She knew that her offer to serve the family, her initial plea for survival, was still on the table, unspoken but understood. Mr. Thompson had yet to address it directly, and Ahioka wondered whether he would ever accept her help formally, or if he feared misunderstanding or exploitation. She understood his caution. Strangers were often mistrusted, and the frontier had seen its share of danger. Yet she also knew that this hesitation might delay the security she so desperately wanted for her child. Every day she worked diligently, hoping her actions would speak louder than words, demonstrating her sincerity and commitment. One afternoon, after Little Hawk had finished helping sweep the cabin and feed the chickens, Ahioka approached Mr. Thompson while he repaired a section of the fence. She carried a basket of firewood, placing it neatly beside the stove before turning to face him. Her hands were red from the cold, her clothes layered and worn, yet her eyes were steady. "Sir," she began, her voice quiet but firm, "I wish to speak with you. I have offered myself to help care for my child, as I said before. I am ready to work in any way that is needed. Please, tell me how I may repay your kindness." Mr. Thompson paused, leaning on his tools and studying her carefully. He had been observing her closely, noting her diligence, her honesty, and the way she cared for her child. He saw how she worked without complaint, how she navigated the chores of the ranch with quiet determination. Her words were honest, yes, but it was her actions that had spoken most clearly. After a long moment of thought, he nodded slowly. "Ahioka," he said, using her name with a respect that made her heart lift. "You do not need to repay me with anything that would harm you or your child. Your care for him, the way you have endured and persevered, that is enough. But there are tasks here, chores that must be done, and I will not leave you without purpose. If you wish to work, I will accept your help. It will be fair and it will benefit all of us." Ahioka felt a rush of relief and gratitude. She bowed slightly, acknowledging his words.
"Thank you, sir," she said softly.
"I only wish to do what is right for my child, and to help in any way I can." Her humility and sincerity were evident, and Mr. Thompson nodded, pleased with her response. The following days were filled with labor and learning. Ahioka rose early each morning, completing chores alongside Mr. Chukov Thompson, who patiently guided her through tasks she had never performed before. She learned to tend to the animals, feed and groom the horses, and collect eggs from the chickens. She repaired sections of the fence alongside him, learning to handle tools with care. Each task required patience, strength, and attention to detail, qualities Ahioka possessed in abundance. As she worked, she also began to observe Mr. Thompson's methods, noting how he treated the land and animals with respect and care. It was a quiet lesson in responsibility, one that mirrored the value she had learned from her own tribe. Little Hawk followed her lead, eager to assist where he could. He learned to gather kindling, carry water, and even help with small tasks in the kitchen. His laughter began to fill the cabin, a bright and joyful sound that warmed the hearts of everyone within its walls. Ahioka watched him with pride, marveling at how resilient he had become despite the trials they had endured. Each day, the bond between mother and child grew stronger, and their sense of safety expanded beyond mere survival. One evening, after a long day of work, Ahioka sat near the fire, mending clothing that had been worn thin from the harsh winter. Mr. Thompson entered with a small bundle of herbs he had gathered from the surrounding land. He handed them to her with a nod. "These will help keep you both warm," he said, his voice low and calm. "They are simple, but they work." Ahioka accepted the herbs with a bow, grateful for his thoughtfulness. She carefully prepared them, adding them to water to create a warm, soothing drink for herself and Little Hawk. As they drank, Ahioka reflected on the unusual circumstances that had brought them here. She had offered herself in desperation, prepared to risk everything to save her child, yet she had been met with mercy and kindness. The act of generosity by the rancher had not only saved her son's life, but it also restored her faith in the goodness of people. She realized that survival was not just about strength or skill, but about connection, trust, and the willingness to show and receive compassion. Over the following weeks, Ahioka and Mr. Thompson began to develop a quiet understanding. They worked together in silence at times, their efforts coordinated and efficient. She learned the rhythm of the ranch, the way the animals responded to routine, and the delicate balance required to maintain the land. He in turn learned about her skills and knowledge, appreciating the insights she shared about tracking animals, finding edible plants, and surviving in the harsh winter conditions. Their cooperation became a subtle dance, a partnership built on respect rather than obligation. Despite the growing bond, Ahioka remained cautious. She knew that trust was fragile, and that even the smallest misstep could jeopardize the delicate balance they had created. She carefully monitored Little Hawk, ensuring he learned respect for both the ranch and its owner. She spoke to him gently but firmly, teaching him that gratitude and humility were as important as strength and courage. The boy absorbed her lessons quickly, his natural curiosity tempered by the understanding that survival depended on cooperation and respect. One particularly cold morning, a heavy snowfall forced them to stay indoors. Ahioka took the opportunity to teach Little Hawk how to prepare simple meals and mend clothing. She showed him how to gather firewood efficiently and maintain the fire so it would last through the long night. Mr. Thompson observed quietly, impressed by her patience and skill. He realized that her knowledge extended beyond basic survival. She possessed a wisdom born of experience and necessity, a resource that could benefit the entire ranch. During this time, Ahioka also began to share stories of her tribe, speaking of their traditions, their connection to the land, and the lessons passed down through generations. She told tales of brave ancestors, of clever hunters and wise elders, and Little Hawk listened with rapt attention. Even Mr. Thompson found himself captivated by her stories, gaining a deeper understanding of the culture and history that had shaped her. The exchange of knowledge created a bridge between them, a bond that transcended background and circumstance. As the winter deepened, the harsh conditions outside contrasted sharply with the warmth and safety inside the cabin. The wind howled and snow piled high, but within those walls, life continued. Ahioka and Little Hawk thrived, their spirits buoyed by the care and guidance of Mr. Thompson. The rancher, in turn, found satisfaction in witnessing the transformation of the small family, recognizing that his choice to show mercy had not only saved lives but also fostered mutual respect and cooperation. One evening, as the fire crackled and the shadows danced on the walls, Ahioka approached Mr. Thompson once more. Her voice was steady but gentle. "Sir, I wish to thank you for your kindness. You have saved my child and given us hope. I will continue to work here, to repay your generosity through my efforts and knowledge. Please know that my gratitude is endless." Mr. Thompson nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You have already shown that your work and care are reward enough. But I appreciate your words. They remind me why compassion is worth showing, even when it is difficult." In those quiet moments, Ahioka reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had faced impossible odds, wandering through the snow with a weak and starving child, offering everything she had in the hope of mercy. And she had been met, not with cruelty, but with understanding and care. The experience had strengthened her resolve, teaching her that courage, love, and patience were just as vital as strength and skill in ensuring survival. The bond between mother, child, and rancher continued to grow, rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. Ahioka had found more than safety. She had found a community, a place where her efforts were valued and her child could thrive. Little Hawk laughed and played, learning the skills necessary for life in the frontier, while Ahioka watched over him, her heart swelling with pride and hope. As the days passed, the story of their arrival at the ranch remained a quiet memory, a testament to the power of mercy and the strength of maternal love. Ahioka understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she now possessed the tools, knowledge, and allies to face them. The harsh winter had tested them, but it had also revealed the depth of human kindness and the resilience of the human spirit. And so, life at the ranch became a delicate balance of labor, learning, and quiet joy. Ahioka and Little Hawk survived, not only through skill and determination, but through the simple yet profound act of mercy shown by a stranger. In the warmth of the cabin by the fire's glow, they found more than survival. They found hope, trust, and the beginnings of a new life, forged in the cold but nurtured by kindness. Winter had not yet loosened its grip on the plains, but life at the ranch had settled into a steady rhythm. Ahioka and Little Hawk had grown accustomed to the routines of the household, and the harsh cold outside was now only a distant worry when they were indoors. Each morning, Ahioka rose early, tending to the fire, fetching water, and preparing a simple breakfast for her child. Little Hawk helped when he could, his small hands carrying firewood or sweeping the cabin floor. Though he was still young, he had learned the value of work and responsibility, lessons imparted gently but firmly by his mother. Despite the sense of security they now enjoyed, Ahioka never let her guard down completely. She knew that life on the frontier was unpredictable. Storms could isolate the ranch for days, and provisions could run low if misfortune struck. Yet, she also understood that the kindness of Mr. Thompson had given them a second chance, a chance that she could honor through careful work and steadfast care for her child. She approached every task with determination, driven by the knowledge that Little Hawk's safety depended on her actions and decisions. One day, while tending to the animals with Mr. Thompson, Ahioka noticed the careful way he treated each one. He spoke softly to the horses as he brushed them, checking for injuries or signs of illness. She realized that his strength was not only in his hands, but in his heart. He treated life with care, respecting every creature and every part of the land. Ahioka silently admired him, recognizing that the lessons she was learning went beyond survival. They were lessons in stewardship and compassion, values she could pass on to Little Hawk. Little Hawk, ever curious, asked questions as he followed his mother through the ranch. "Mother, why does he talk to the animals?" he asked, pointing to the brown mare that had taken an interest in him. Ahioka smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from his forehead. "Because, my child, respect brings trust," she replied gently. "He cares for them, and in return, they trust him. All creatures, even people, respond to kindness." Little Hawk nodded, his small face serious as he tried to absorb the meaning of her words. As the days passed, the bond between Ahioka and Mr. Thompson grew stronger. They learned to communicate without always speaking, understanding each other through gestures and shared routines. Ahioka began to take on more responsibility around the ranch, helping to repair fences, tend the garden, and assist with the animals. She felt a quiet pride in her ability to contribute, knowing that her work was valued and appreciated.
Mr.
Thompson, in turn, began to trust her more fully, relying on her skills and knowledge to help maintain the ranch during the harsh winter. One particularly difficult day, a sudden snowstorm swept across the plains, trapping them inside the cabin for hours. The wind howled, rattling the windows and making the walls creak under its pressure. Ahioka and Little Hawk huddled near the fire, their blankets wrapped tightly around them. Mr. Thompson moved between the hearth and the front door, checking that it was secure and that the animals were sheltered. Despite the storm's fury, there was a sense of calm within the cabin, a feeling born of preparedness and trust. Ahioka realized that they had survived the worst of the winter not only because of skill and strength, but because of their willingness to rely on each other. During the storm, Ahioka found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. She thought of the treacherous journey across the snow-covered plains, of the moments when she had feared for Little Hawk's life, and of the courage it had taken to approach a stranger for help. She remembered the offer she had made, the promise to give herself in service if it meant saving her child, and the mercy shown by Mr. Thompson. That act of kindness had changed everything, giving them not only warmth and food but also hope and a chance to survive. As the snowstorm raged outside, Ahioka decided to use the time wisely. She began to teach Little Hawk practical skills, showing him how to identify edible roots in the wild, how to recognize signs of animals in the snow, and how to start a small fire using minimal materials. Though they were indoors, the lessons were grounded in preparation for the future, a way to ensure that he would be capable even when facing hardships beyond the ranch. Little Hawk listened intently, his small hands imitating her movements, his eyes wide with curiosity. Each lesson was a seed of knowledge, one that would grow into confidence and skill as he matured. After the storm passed, Ahyoka and Little Hawk ventured outside to assess the damage. Snow had piled high against the fences, and some of the garden plants had been flattened. Ahioka worked tirelessly to clear paths, repair damage, and ensure the animals were safe and fed. Mr. Thompson joined her, and together they restored order to the ranch. Though exhausting, the labor brought them closer, fostering a sense of teamwork and mutual respect. Ahioka realized that survival was not only about enduring hardship, but also about cooperation, planning, and shared effort. Over time, the presence of Ahioka and Little Hawk brought subtle changes to the ranch. Mr. Thompson began to notice how attentive she was to the animals, how carefully she managed resources, and how thoughtfully she planned each day. He appreciated the new perspective she brought, recognizing that her knowledge of the land and the ways of survival complemented his own experience. Slowly, he began to include her in decisions, seeking her input on matters ranging from the care of livestock to the management of the garden. Ahioka felt a deep sense of validation, knowing that her skills were respected and valued. As the winter wore on, Ahioka began to think about the future beyond mere survival. She wanted to ensure that Little Hawk would not only survive but thrive. She taught him lessons about kindness, empathy, and respect, emphasizing that strength alone was not enough to navigate life. She showed him how to help others in need, how to observe without judgment, and how to act with courage when faced with difficult choices. Little Hawk absorbed these lessons with a remarkable attentiveness, his young mind quick to understand the importance of both skill and compassion. One afternoon, a neighbor from a nearby ranch arrived unexpectedly. He had heard of the newcomers and was curious to meet the woman who had arrived during the harsh winter. Ahioka greeted him politely, introducing herself and Little Hawk with warmth. Mr. Thompson observed the interaction carefully, noting how Ahioka conducted herself with dignity and respect. The neighbor, impressed by her composure and poise, offered assistance in the form of supplies and advice for managing the remainder of the winter. Ahioka graciously accepted, grateful for the support, but she remained mindful of the balance between independence and reliance on others. As the days passed, Ahioka also took time to strengthen her connection with the land. She explored the surrounding area, identifying plants, animal tracks, and potential resources that could help sustain them during lean times. She shared these discoveries with Mr. Rhodes Thompson, who was impressed by her keen observation and deep understanding of nature. Their collaboration continued to flourish, blending knowledge from different backgrounds into a harmonious approach to life on the frontier. Through it all, the bond between Ahioka, Little Hawk, and Mr. Thompson grew stronger. They had faced adversity together, relied on each other in moments of fear and uncertainty, and learned to respect one another's strengths. Ahioka understood that the mercy extended to her and her child had not only saved lives but had also created a foundation for lasting trust and cooperation. She felt a sense of belonging she had never known before, a quiet acknowledgement that, despite the hardships of the world, there were people willing to act with kindness and integrity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ahioka and Little Hawk stood outside the cabin. The boy had grown taller and stronger, his cheeks rosy and his eyes bright with vitality. Ahioka held his small hand, feeling the warmth and strength that had returned to him. She reflected on the journey they had undertaken, the fear, the struggle, and the desperate offer she had made to save him. She realized that every step had led to this moment, a moment of safety, growth, and renewed hope. Inside the cabin, Mr. Thompson prepared a simple meal for the three of them. He moved quietly, carefully arranging food on the table, aware that his actions had created a space where mercy and kindness had flourished. Ahioka watched him from across the room, a sense of deep gratitude swelling in her chest. She understood that survival was not only about skill or courage, but about the choices of those around them, the willingness to act with compassion even when it was difficult or inconvenient. As they ate, laughter filled the room, soft and comforting. Little Hawk shared a small story from his day, his words bright with curiosity and joy. Ahioka smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in many months. The hardships of the journey and the harshness of winter had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, more connected, and more resilient. The ranch had become more than a place of shelter. It had become a home, a place where love, trust, and respect could thrive despite the cold and challenges outside. Ahioka knew that the future would still hold difficulties. The frontier was unpredictable, and life could change in an instant. Yet, she felt ready to face whatever came, armed with the lessons of perseverance, compassion, and courage. She had seen firsthand the power of mercy, the strength of maternal love, and the importance of trust. These lessons would guide her as she continued to care for Little Hawk and contribute to the ranch, ensuring that their lives would be sustained not just by survival but by the bonds they had built. And so the winter continued, harsh yet manageable, filled with work, learning, and quiet joy. Ahioka and Little Hawk thrived under the care and guidance of Mr. Thompson, while their presence brought new perspective and energy to the ranch. They had survived not only the cold but also the fear and uncertainty of their early journey, proving that courage, love, and mercy could overcome even the harshest conditions. In the warmth of the cabin by the glow of the fire, a new chapter of life had begun, a chapter defined by hope, respect, and the quiet power of human kindness. The harsh winter was slowly giving way to the first signs of spring. Snow melted along the edges of the plains, revealing the brown and green earth beneath. Streams that had been frozen for months began to flow again, and the air carried the faint scent of new life. Ahioka and Little Hawk emerged from the cabin one morning to feel the warmth of the sun on their faces. The chill of winter had not left entirely, but the light of the new season brought with it hope and promise. Ahioka's heart swelled with gratitude as she held her child close, noticing how much he had grown and strengthened since the long, bitter months of cold and hunger. Life at the ranch had become a steady routine, one that combined work, learning, and moments of quiet joy. Ahioka worked alongside Mr. Thompson, caring for the animals, tending the garden, and preparing food. Little Hawk helped when he could, often running errands or assisting with chores suited to his small hands. The ranch had become more than a shelter. It was a place of growth, safety, and opportunity. Ahioka reflected on how far they had come, from the days when she had wandered across the snow-covered plains, fearing that her child would not survive, to now when they were strong, healthy, and secure. One afternoon, Mr. Thompson approached Ahioka as she tended the garden. His expression was serious, but gentle.
"Ahioka," he said, "you have worked tirelessly, cared for Little Hawk, and contributed to this ranch more than I could have imagined. I want you to know that your presence here is valued not just for the work you do, but for who you are."
You have shown courage, patience, and kindness in a way that inspires everyone around you. Ahioka felt a deep warmth in her chest at his words. She had offered herself out of desperation, fearing that her child's life depended on her willingness to serve. Yet through honesty, determination, and love, she had earned respect and trust, not only survival. Little Hawk, who had been playing nearby with a small wooden toy, ran to her side and hugged her tightly. "Mother," he said, "I am happy here." "I like it here." "Thank you." His voice was filled with innocence and sincerity, and Ahioka felt tears prick her eyes. She held him close, whispering promises that she would always protect him, guide him, and help him grow strong and kind. She knew that her actions had not only saved his life, but had also given him a future filled with opportunity and hope. As the weeks turned into months, Ahioka's connection with the rancher deepened. They shared quiet moments discussing plans for the garden, ways to care for the animals, and strategies for preserving food for future seasons. Mr. Thompson had come to rely on her not only for labor, but also for insight and guidance. He appreciated the knowledge she brought from her own experience and culture, recognizing that her perspective enriched the ranch in ways he could never have achieved alone. Ahioka, in turn, respected him for his patience, fairness, and willingness to see beyond fear and suspicion. The story of Ahioka's arrival and her desperate plea for help spread quietly among neighboring settlers and travelers. It became a tale of courage and mercy, of a mother's love and a man's compassion. Many were inspired by the story, and some came to the ranch offering assistance, advice, or supplies. Ahioka welcomed them with humility, sharing what she had learned and showing respect for the kindness that others extended. Through these interactions, she reinforced the lesson she wanted Little Hawk to learn, that courage, honesty, and compassion were as important as strength and skill. Spring brought with it the renewal of the land. Ahioka worked with Mr. Bedowak Thompson to plant crops, repair fences damaged by the winter storms, and prepare the ranch for the warmer months. Little Hawk enjoyed exploring the fields, observing animals, and learning the ways of the land. Ahioka encouraged his curiosity, answering questions patiently and demonstrating practical skills that would serve him well in the future. The bond between mother and child grew even stronger, nurtured by shared work, laughter, and the sense of security that had replaced the fear of the harsh winter. One morning, Ahioka led Little Hawk to a nearby stream that had begun to flow with spring water. She knelt by the edge and pointed to the small fish darting beneath the surface. "See, my child," she said, "even after the hardest winter, life returns. The world is strong, and it endures. We must be like the water, flowing and moving forward, even after hardship. We must be patient, resilient, and kind." Little Hawk listened intently, his young mind absorbing the lesson. He reached into the water carefully, watching the fish swim away, learning that life was delicate and required respect and understanding. As the season progressed, Ahioka also began to reflect on her journey, the moments of fear, the decision she had made, and the mercy shown by Mr. Thompson. She realized that her life had been shaped by courage, both hers and that of others. Her willingness to approach the rancher, her determination to protect her child, and her openness to trust had all contributed to their survival. Mr. Thompson's decision to offer compassion rather than judgment had created an opportunity for new beginnings. Together, they had formed a community built on mutual respect, understanding, and care. Little Hawk continued to thrive, his laughter and curiosity filling the cabin and the surrounding fields. Ahioka took pride in his growth, knowing that he was learning lessons that would serve him for the rest of his life. She taught him not only practical skills but also values: honesty, kindness, courage, and respect for others. She showed him that strength alone was not enough to navigate life. Compassion and understanding were equally important. Mr. Thompson observed these lessons with quiet approval, recognizing that the boy was developing into a capable, thoughtful, and resilient young person. One afternoon, as Ahioka and Mr. Thompson repaired a section of fence together, he paused and looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "Ahioka," he said, "you have taught me as much as I have taught you. You have shown patience, courage, and wisdom beyond your years. I am grateful for your presence, and I hope you and Little Hawk feel at home here." Ahioka smiled, feeling a deep sense of belonging. She realized that home was not just a physical place, but a space created through trust, care, and mutual respect. As spring gave way to summer, the ranch flourished. Crops grew strong, animals were healthy, and the cabin became a place of laughter and learning. Ahioka and Little Hawk had become integral parts of the life of the ranch, their contributions valued and appreciated. The story of their survival, courage, and the mercy shown to them became a quiet legend, inspiring others to act with compassion, even in difficult circumstances. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Ahioka stood with Little Hawk on a hill overlooking the ranch. The boy pointed to the distant fields and animals, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mother," he said, "we are safe. We are happy. Thank you." Ahioka hugged him tightly, feeling a profound sense of peace. She understood that her journey had been difficult, that she had faced fear, hunger, and uncertainty, but that her courage and love had led to this moment of safety, hope, and joy. Inside the cabin, Mr. Thompson prepared a simple meal, the aroma of fresh bread and stew filling the air. Ahioka and Little Hawk joined him at the table, and they shared stories of the day's work, laughter, and quiet reflections. The bond between them was strong, rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and the recognition of the mercy that had brought them together. The cabin was more than a shelter now. It was a home, a place where love, understanding, and hope flourished. Ahioka often thought of the journey that had led her here, the long, snow-covered plains, the fear of losing her child, and the courage it had taken to seek help. She reflected on the mercy shown by Mr. Thompson and the lessons it had taught her. She understood that compassion could change lives, that courage and love were powerful forces, and that trust and cooperation could create a future filled with possibility. These lessons she vowed to carry with her always, passing them on to Little Hawk so he could navigate the world with wisdom and heart. As the seasons changed, Ahioka and Little Hawk continued to thrive. The harsh winter that had once threatened to take Little Hawk's life became a distant memory, replaced by a life of opportunity, growth, and connection. Mr. Thompson continued to guide and support them, fostering a partnership built on trust and respect. Together, they had overcome adversity, demonstrating that courage, love, and mercy could triumph even in the harshest conditions. The story of Ahioka and Little Hawk became more than a tale of survival. It became a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of kindness. Their journey showed that even in the face of despair, acts of compassion could create opportunities, restore faith, and build lasting bonds. Ahioka's love for her child and Mr. Thompson's mercy had created a new life, one filled with warmth, safety, and the promise of the future. And so, life continued at the ranch, filled with laughter, learning, and the quiet beauty of everyday moments. Ahioka and Little Hawk thrived in their new home, carrying with them the lessons of survival, courage, and mercy. The bond between mother, child, and rancher remained strong, a testament to the power of love and kindness. They had endured the harsh winter together, and in doing so they had discovered that hope, trust, and compassion were stronger than any storm. In the warmth of the cabin, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the safety of their home, Ahioka reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had faced impossible odds, made sacrifices, and relied on the mercy of another to save her child. In return, she had found not only survival, but a community, a home, and the knowledge that courage and compassion could shape the future. Little Hawk, now strong and joyful, ran around the cabin with unrestrained laughter, a living reminder of the power of love and mercy. The ranch stood as a symbol of endurance, trust, and human kindness. And for Ahioka, Little Hawk, and Mr. Thompson, it was more than a place to live. It was a testament to the courage of a mother, the mercy of a stranger, and the enduring strength of the human heart. Together they had faced the worst of the winter, and together they had found warmth, safety, and hope. Their story became a quiet legend, one that would be remembered not for the hardships endured, but for the love, mercy, and courage that overcame them.